G'day. Welcome to another interview with a survivor slash adventurer. This is all about Tom Robinson, 24-year-old, built his own rowboat out of wood, shipped it to Peru, and started rowing for Australia. Most recently, you might have seen on the news that he was rescued from that boat naked as it was upturned off Noumea. So it was a pretty amazing story. That's how I saw it. I saw him being interviewed on the Today Show, and I got in contact, and luckily he's generous enough to come on the show and give us his story. So really looking forward to my chat with Tom Robinson. Tom, thanks so much for coming on. It's unbelievable that you're here, you're alive, and you've got amazing stories to tell. Can you give people your life story that got you to the point where you started rowing across the ocean in your own homemade rowboat?
Yeah, so thanks for that introduction, Mike. That was lovely. So I've been boat obsessed almost my whole life, and as well as boat obsessed, I've been adventure obsessed, and those two sort of go together quite nicely. The boat's sort of a perfect tool for adventuring in many different ways. And so as a teenager, I grew up on the Brisbane River here in Brisbane, and I was always rowing. I rowed to and from school every day. I used to row in the afternoons, fishing. I'd go sailing, all those sorts of different things. And sometimes I'd row for 5 hours at a time all the way down to the mouth of the river, and then get my dad to pick me up in his car and drive me home with the boat, all those sorts of things. And so one day when I was 14, I woke up and I told myself I was going to row across the Pacific Ocean. And this wasn't sort of an idea that came out of nowhere. I'd been reading heaps of books about sailors and adventurers, especially around the world solo sailors. And I thought, well, that does sound pretty good, but I want to test myself a bit more. I really want to test myself physically and see where the limit lies. And so I came up with this journey to row across the Pacific Ocean. And obviously to do that, I needed a boat. And so I figured, well, I better learn how to build boats first. So after finishing high school, I spent 4 years doing an apprenticeship as a boat builder. And then as soon as I finished my 4 years and I had my qualification, I left my job and I started to design and build my 24-foot rowing boat, Maiwa. And once that was built, then there was a big sort of process to get that shipped over to South America during COVID, which was a big, big hassle. But the boat was over there, I flew over there, and then I began to row home. And then that takes me up to where I am now.
Awesome. And I've just been looking at your boat building video on YouTube, and you've got some awesome clips on YouTube and your website as well. And it is a sleek boat, and I just love the fact that you came up with the idea yourself. I know you got an existing design, but you tweaked a whole bunch of things on there. It's a classy looking wooden boat, and that's most ocean rowboats are fiberglass, and people just kind of buy them and row them, but it's a completely different story to have the balls to build something yourself for starters, particularly out of wood, and then row across the ocean, because your life's going to be like basically on the value of the structural soundness of that thing. And when you commit to that, it's a big feeling, which I know from personal experience. And yours was way longer than the longest journeys I've done as well. So that's a huge level of confidence. And I'm guessing you just accepted the risks that were going to happen. Can you tell us a little bit about that build and how much confidence you had that it would be good enough at the end?
Yeah. So the whole design and build process was a really interesting experience for me, a great learning curve. And so I did design the boat myself. The boat's based on whale boats, which were a traditional rowing boat in the sort of 17th, 18th, 19th century in the Pacific. So I started with a block of timber, and I carved that block of wood into a half model of the shape I wanted. And once I had that perfect shape, I cut the model into sections. I traced those sections onto a piece of paper, and then from those tracings, I produced a lines plan. And then from that lines plan, I then drew the boat out full size on the loft floor, they call it. So there was a 24-foot long drawing on the floor.
Yeah.
And then from there, I began to build the boat. And for me, it was really important that it was a wooden boat. I think people these days get a bit too excited about carbon fiber. People would say, oh, why aren't you building it out of carbon fiber? And when you look at the total weight of the boat and the length of the journey and the savings that I would have made in carbon fiber, like it's a very small percentage of the overall weight of the vessel because the hull itself is relatively light. And then you think about days at sea. So maybe you'd save a few days if you were in a carbon fiber, plastic, fantastic. But for me, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about breaking records to be the fastest or anything like that. And so I think for me, a wooden boat was really important. I wanted to have that connection with the boat.
Yeah.
And I even got to go to the plantation in Queensland where the logs were chopped down to make the plywood to build my boat.
Nice.
So that was a really cool experience.
What kind of tree?
That's hoop pine, Queensland hoop pine.
No kidding. My dugout canoe was made of Norfolk, which is almost like...
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Norfolk pine, no way.
Yeah,
where did that tree come from?
It was chopped down in a city in Newcastle, basically. And I found it in a farmer's paddock just before he milled it.
Oh, no way. Yeah,
it was hoop pine's
Fantastic.
got slightly better properties, I think, than Norfolk.
It does. There's less knots in hoop pine,
Yep.
so that's where it has its advantage. And so I was sponsored by Austral Plywoods, who make really high quality marine plywood here in Brisbane, just down the road from my house here, actually. And so they produced all the plywood for the boat, and we did get to visit the plantations where those trees were chopped down. Awesome. So that was a really cool experience for me. And it was a challenge to build the boat lightweight, because obviously, like, weight's important. And so I didn't, like, it's not important down to the gram, but it's important to try and make this boat as strong and as light as possible. And so for me, building a boat out of epoxy and plywood to make it strong and lightweight was a real challenge and something I really enjoyed. And the end product was very strong, very light, and I really couldn't have been happier with how the boat turned out.
Yeah, and the thought that went into so many of those little things, like the rudder that moves up and down. You check all the stuff.
That was really helpful.
Yeah, it's a really good risk management feature too, if you do end up on a beach or something like that as well.
Yeah,
but just
that rudder that could move up and down, that saved my ass many times on the trip, and most notably when I was approaching Gower Island in Vanuatu after 52 days at sea from Samoa, and I saw a break in the reef, and I didn't know how deep it was. I didn't know what was going on, but I had to find shelter on that island. And a bloke paddled out in his and he waved me through this path, so I knew which way I should go. And I lifted up the rudder with one piece of rope, and I was able to glide in over the reef through the breaking waves and get to safety. And if that rudder hadn't been able to do that, it would have been all over.
Yeah, and there's no autopilot on this thing. I love there's little, like the method of steering with your feet whilst your feet are rowing. There's a whole range of different, really well thought out features on that thing. So well done. And I just encourage people to go and watch that, because it's a well made video and just shows how much detail, and the fact that, like, you can tell when someone's built every centimeter or something, because they just know every inch of it in their heads. And so when they talk about it, there's no thoughts. It's just, where everything kind of came from. So you got the thing made. How long did it take?
It took 5 months to build the boat.
That's good. I hoped mine would take 4. It took 14. And so,
14, yeah.
and yours in many ways is more complex than mine as well.
Yeah, I would say so.
I was restricted on the things I was making, but that seems quite quick to me, and it's really well finished as well. And
yeah, that was 5 months to launch day, and then after launch day there was another month or two of finalising electrics, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
but yeah,
and I saw you doing the rollover test, which will obviously come into play a bit later on.
Yeah,
which it passed. I noticed you had 3 fenders stuck on the top for that. Was that?
Yes.
Did you feel without that it wouldn't right itself, or?
So we tried it without the fenders on the roof, and it was still very unstable upside down. It wouldn't sit, nicely upside down. But from me being inside the cabin, I wasn't able to ride it without the fenders on the roof.
Yep.
And that's in a calm sea on the river here where we tested it. I think even without the fenders in a sea state that would roll you, it would ride itself without the fenders.
Yeah.
But for the whole trip, I had 4 fenders strapped to the roof whenever it was a bit blowy.
Yeah. Right.
Just in case.
Yeah, cool. And obviously, like, it's well thought out stability wise. It's got that wide base, which is great. But then when you do end upside down, it makes it harder to ride it as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But I would have chosen the same kind of design myself.
Yeah, it's pretty much in line with all the other ocean rowing boats out there, and the foundation between their with their self-riding ability is that you keep that main hatch closed. That means that the cabin is full of air, which means that the boat's unstable upside down.
Cool. And so getting it to Peru, can you tell us about some of the dramas that happened there?
Nightmare stuff. That was one of the hardest parts of the whole journey, really. So I had a sponsor who did a few things for me, really great company. And then they said that they had a company that was going to send the boat to me to Peru free of charge. I went, you beauty, that's really good. That's just what I need.
Yeah.
Anyway, they kind of messed me around for about a month there. Nothing ended up happening. And I got to the point where I was in a meeting. I was saying, well, what's going on, guys? And they said, yeah, we can't do it. It's too complex, because they're used to shipping mining equipment. That's pretty straightforward. But when you've got a rowing boat, you've got all this different ancillary gear. I was trying to get food over there as well, all this stuff. To a place like to a country in South America, that's a real challenge. Bureaucracy is a big issue there. So they bailed out on me, which was a real blow. Thankfully, they still provided me with some cash to ship the boat. They recommended me to another company who were basically criminals, and they did everything they could to make my life as hard as possible. And so it took 6 months just to get the boat in a container, and then it took 5 months to get the boat from Brisbane to Peru.
No way. 6 months to get it in a container. Far out.
Yeah, that was during COVID, which was really hard with shipping.
Yeah.
So big challenge there. And then the shipping agents in Peru were basically teaming up with the shipping agents in Australia to basically rip me off as much as they could, because they knew the situation I was in. And so they knew that I was helpless. Although I had some great guys over there who were helping me, and the board of the yacht club over there were really generous and really good to me. We had a meeting one day, and with these they were criminals basically. Yeah. And it was all in Spanish. I didn't really know what was going on, but after the meeting, the yacht club board said to me, these guys are criminals. You can either stay here for another year and try and go through a legal battle, or you can just pay the bill and start rowing.
Yeah.
So it ended up costing about 3 times more than it should have.
And so it was 20 grand to get it to Peru and 20 grand to get it freed up, right?
Yeah.
$40,000. That's, yeah.
And pre-COVID, I was expecting, I think I was expecting 12.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then COVID hit, and then these guys happened. So that was a nightmare situation. But it was also one of the proudest moments of the journey.
Yeah.
Me being able to pay that bill and just get on with the adventure. There are so many people that they aim high, but then they don't have that redundancy there in case things turn sour. And that's when the adventure fails. And so for me, being basically financially in a position where I was able to pay that and it wasn't going to kill me, that was a really important thing for me.
Awesome. And so departure day, was it pretty much, your food was in there, a few things and off you go, or were you waiting for a certain weather window to get away from the coast?
So in Peru, I was there a month waiting for the boat to come out. And then once the boat came out, there was a month before I departed. It's not like in Australia where you can kind of leave in any boat you want, anytime you want. There was all sorts of meetings and naval inspections, and I had to go to all these offices in these naval shipyards and talk to these high up guys in their white suits sort of thing. It was all pretty crazy. But yeah, so I had to do a lot of food shopping in Peru, a lot of provisioning, lots and lots of paperwork. I had to anti-foul the boat, just a bit of testing the boat, a bit of rowing around, all that sort of thing. And then obviously there was a few celebrations and parties I had to go to before I was allowed to leave. So yeah.
And the day of departure, like what time did you leave, and what was the weather like, and what was going through your mind?
Yeah, that was a really wild day. I was meant to leave the previous week, but then that got cancelled for whatever reason. Something wasn't in order paperwork wise. But eventually departure day came. Remember, I woke up and I was living at the rowing club just down the street from the yacht club where the boat was. They were all looking after me in this little area. And so I walked down to the boat and I sort of cleaned up my room where I'd been staying for 2 months, packed it all into the boat. Then all these people started arriving at the yacht club, and some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. Then this naval brass band turns up, and I assumed it must have been for some other event. But then the manager of the yacht club gave me this knowing look, like, this is for you, Tom. So that was really strange. And then I remember we had to wait for like 2 hours for my clearance papers. So I wasn't legal yet until these papers turned up, and so I was pretty nervous. I was kind of walking around. Everyone wanted to take pictures with me, chat with me. It was all a bit overwhelming, and it was just dragging on and on and on because these papers hadn't turned up. Eventually, these 2 officials turned up with these papers. We sat down at this table, and they had a a custom made stamp with the name of the boat, Maywa, and they stamped the paper, and I signed on the dotted line, and then everyone erupted and cheered, and there were all these photos taken. I felt like a politician or something signing some peace agreement. It was really strange. And then I got into Maywa. There was lots of rowing boats around. There was naval patrol boats around, all yachts and everything. And then I went into the cabin. I got changed into my rowing clothes and took a deep breath, and I went, this is it. And I was just really focused at that point. I kind of just zoned in, and I was talking to people a bit later, months later, about what it was like for them. And they said there was this sort of focus in your eyes about what you were doing. And yeah, I was really focused, and it was a calm day in Lima there. It's always sort of cloudy and dull. There was an oily sea. It was really calm. All these boats sort of escorted me out, and then eventually, one by one, they all left. They all left until just one boat stayed with me, my good friend Gonzalo and his family. And then eventually he turned around, and there was tears in everyone's eyes, and I was just left alone with the sea lions on this sort of grey, oily, calm sea, and it was very surreal. Yeah.
Wow. It's something that people, unless they've done that kind of adventure, it's hard to imagine how you're trying to stay focused and deal with the politeness of all these people who, many of them have gone so far out of their way to help you out. And you almost have to plan two departures, like one to get all that stuff out of the way and another one to really set off. But you don't have that luxury. And if the wind's blowing up, and sometimes you just got to suck it up and depart at a more dangerous time, because you've got to pay all those kind of social debts to people.
It's tricky. It is tricky. Yeah. Yeah.
And can you describe, where does that name come from?
So Maywa is the Aboriginal name for the Brisbane River here.
Yeah.
So she was built on the banks of Maywa, and so I thought hopefully she might return to Maywa, but I don't know about that anymore.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. I named my boat Salty Gungaroo, which is the Gugu Yimithin name for kangaroo. So yeah, I like that touch of the name. And so you're setting off. How were those first few days? Was it what you expected or not?
The first few days were hard. I was really nervous of all the fishing boats around the area.
Yeah.
So the port of Callao there is one of the biggest ports on the South American west coast. Lots of container ships, lots of fishing boats. The pirates are even an issue there. So on the radio at night time, the port authorities just going over the radio pretty regularly, watch out for pirates, watch out for suspicious craft, unlit craft, all this sort of thing. And that was the start of the journey. And I thought, well, if a pirate comes now and they rob me of all my gear, then that's going to be a really bad situation. And so those first few days were kind of nerve-wracking, and also it got quite rough quite quickly. And it was all fresh and new and exciting and strange. The boat was pretty heavily loaded at that point, so it wasn't as comfortable as it would have otherwise been. And yeah, those first few days were very strange, but also very, very exciting. And 10 years at that point, 9 years of dreaming.
Yeah.
And then it's a reality, and you're out there, and you know that after a week at sea, you can't turn back. That's it. So yeah, it's a strange feeling.
Yeah. And do you have radar on the boat?
I don't have radar, no. What I do have is I have an AIS transmitter.
Yep.
And for me, that was the most important feature of the boat. So that means that every commercial boat out there can see me pop up on their screen very easily. And so they can click on the arrow and know who I am and my speed and my course and that sort of thing.
And that's transmitted over VHF, right? It's not satellite.
Yeah, that's VHF, but I had this discussion with someone before I left. It's VHF, and it's also GPS. So it gets the GPS signal and it transmits via VHF.
Cool. So basically,
but it does.
It's only people within the general area that have within VHF range, and they're the ones you care about, because they're the ones going to run over you.
Yeah, but also my family back in Australia could also track me from Australia with that, because it sends the signal up to the satellites as well.
Right. Okay. Cool. Did you have a radar reflector on board as well?
Yeah, I had like an old school metal one,
yep,
which kind of crosses over, and so I hung that up a few times during the voyage when I was near big fishing fleets and stuff like that. But every time I did see a ship, regardless if the radar reflector was up or down, I would just call them up on the radio on the VHF and say, "Can you see me on radar, and can you see me on AIS?" And they'd always say, "Yeah, I can see you." So that was nice.
Were you sleeping for like 6 to 8 hours a night?
Yeah. That's one of the beautiful things about ocean rowing, is that you get a good sleep every night. most of the time you get a good sleep. And yeah, you can sleep all through the night. Some people, when they row, they do 4 hours on, 4 hours off, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. But I don't think that's healthy for really extended periods.
Yeah.
So I found that, yeah, I would sleep well most of the night. Yeah.
And to the uninitiated for sailing, you can't really do that because you're always monitoring sails, unless you were to completely desail and chuck out a drogue or something, which is quite inefficient. So yeah, that's a huge bonus for ocean rowing, which I hadn't really considered beforehand. Yeah. Where did you have a desalinator? How are you managing water?
So for me, I wanted this journey to be relatively old school. And so I wanted to be doing it as they did back in the day. So I had a manual pump to turn salt water into fresh, but that was for emergencies only. So I left Peru with maybe 350, 360 litres of water.
Yeah.
And so I was rationing 2 litres a day for about the first 130 days.
Really?
And then it got too much, and I couldn't hack it anymore. And so then I started using the desal pump for about half an hour every day to get an extra litre of water. So I was doing 3 litres a day, which made things just that bit more comfortable.
That's a good benchmark. So 2 litres a day. What were the average temps?
The temp, yeah. Well, see, most of that first leg it was all right, but then when it started to get hot, up to 32 degrees, 35, then 2 litres wasn't enough. But that 2 litres included about 800 mils for cooking.
Yep.
So that was probably, drinking 1,200 mils. And people say that's crazy. That's such a small amount of water. It is. But honestly, for the first 4 months, I thought it was fantastic. I didn't ever want any more than that.
So that 800 mils for cooking, you still consumed, I guess.
Still consumed.
Yeah, you just lost a little bit
correct.
of steam, but yeah.
Yeah.
What about washing? Were you allowing 100 mils to give yourself a rub down with fresh water or anything?
Never. I'm not one of these people that these people that after they go for a swim in the surf, they have to have a fresh shower to get rid of the salt. I've never enjoyed showering in my whole life. So
That's good.
I used a bar of soap on day 161 when just before I got to the island, I went, I better scrub up because I'm going to meet some people today.
What about, when salt spray gets on you and it evaporates and you get more and you've got to wash off the salt spray with salt water to get rid of the salt? Were you washing in seawater regularly or to reduce those sores?
That first leg was very calm. So salt spray and salt on the body wasn't a big issue. And then for the rest of the journey, which was quite rough, I find I just get a rag and try and wipe the salt off me. I tried to stay dry when I could. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How long was it till you hit weather that you started to go, oh shit, this is a bit scary?
Yeah. On the the first leg, the first 160 days, there was probably 2 or 3 or maybe 2 or 3 times in that journey where the weather was a bit rough and it was uncomfortable and I had the drogue out. The second leg, Cook Islands to Samoa, it was very calm that whole leg. And then third leg, Samoa to Vanuatu, it was rough the whole leg. It was just awful the whole time.
Yeah, okay.
And then the last leg, 4 days in, it was rough the whole time.
What month did you start in Peru?
I started the 2nd of July 2022.
And it's just south of Ecuador. So is that the dry season? Did you feel as if you're in the dry season with trade wind assistance?
The trade winds there are very consistent all year round, and the current's quite consistent all year round. You can leave from Peru almost any time of the year because that's also out of the cyclone season. I think if I left it a bit later into the summer season, then the breeze would have been less consistent, so more risk of higher winds. And especially because I was up near the equator most of the time, 3 degrees south most of the time. And so it's very consistent there most of the year, but even in that region, it's not a cyclone region. So
did you find yourself
sort of
in a cyclone region in cyclone season much?
Never, no.
Oh, good. And is that because you were close to the equator?
I stayed on the Cook Islands for 4 months because of that reason.
Okay.
So I got to Penryn Island just before cyclone season began, and I left just after it ended.
Yeah, smart move. That is a risk that I just personally wouldn't bother taking.
I think it's foolhardy to be out there during cyclone season. Some people have done it, but I don't think it's worth the risk.
I ended up in a Category 2 cyclone in a 4.2 metre boat in Northern Territory, And
Yeah.
that's when I decided that I would never go in a small boat in a cyclone.
That's freaky. Wow.
Yeah. It was story for another time. But and we didn't know it was a cyclone at that stage. But it's not a good
Yeah.
feeling, and to have that hanging over your head for a month as one approached, and we both know Michelle Lee, and she kind of had a little bit of that. So Michelle recently rode completely solo across the Pacific herself, non-stop, and so that's how I've got a little bit of an inroads into the challenges of ocean rowing. So yeah, but it is the styles that you guys have done is so different. So yeah. And day to day, like how many hours would you row and rest and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I was rowing between sort of 8 to 12 hours. That was standard. 10 hours is pretty normal. It all depends on what I had to do that day. You know, little jobs take up the day, but usually, yeah, between 8 and 12. So average 10 hours a day. Sometimes it'd be 14 hours a day if I had to or more. And I'd stop and have a couple of hours break during the heat of the day at lunchtime. And I often row into the night, which I found quite nice.
How fast did those hours pass?
They were pleasant. They were pleasant. It didn't. It's not like sometimes it would drag on, and you go, "Geez, this is painful." But most of the time, most of the days, it was just like a normal day at work. You just go into work, you're rowing, you get your smoko, you get your lunch break, then you knock off and you have some dinner. And I found it all very pleasant.
Where was your mind most of that time? What kind of region was it in?
I was dreaming constantly. So I was always planning. I was dreaming about the next adventure. I was dreaming about the next boat. I was designing boats in my head all the time.
Yep.
I could build a boat, you know, every nail, every plank,
yep.
how the drawers would work in the kitchen cabinets, all these different things. So that kept me busy a lot of the time. I was reminiscing about good times with friends and family. My mind was always active, always busy. I do like to write a lot, so I was writing stories in my mind. Sometimes I'd orate a speech for 20 minutes out loud while I was rowing just on some topic I'd thought about. So there was always things to think about. I was never sort of bored or lonely.
Yeah, that's cool. And you kept the journal, a paper journal, right?
Yeah, I kept a log. The first leg was great. I wrote that log pretty much every single day. It wasn't totally interesting, but it was, yeah, every day I wrote that log. The next legs, it was rougher, it was harder. There was less time for that sort of thing. But yeah, I kept a journal for lots of the journey.
How often were you filming?
How often was I filming? That's a good question. Every few days, I would say. I'd just have a chat to the camera. The thing out there is that it's very boring a lot of the time when it comes to filming. Not a lot's happening lots of the time. But I'd make it a routine that I would have a chat to the camera while I was cooking or eating that night. Or if I was going to go fishing, catch some fish, or if I was navigating with the sextant or anything like that.
You were navigating with the sextant, were you?
Yeah, some of the time.
Bonus points.
Yeah. That's it.
Were you just noonday sights, stars? What were you doing?
Yeah, so on the first leg, when I got into a rhythm, I was doing my noon sight every second day. And that was just a backup, just to see how it was just practice, really.
Yep.
Star sights, I didn't do as many of them. It's hard in a little rowing boat that's constantly moving and rocking. But the noon sights, I got them good. You know, I was within 2 or 3 miles relatively frequently. Very rarely was I a long way out. But basically that was just for fun, and that was just to get that practice up. And then it was a lovely feeling knowing that if I lost everything electronically wise and I lost all my backups, I'd still be able to navigate. So that was a good feeling.
Awesome. You probably know this story better than me, or maybe you haven't heard of it, but there was a guy yonks ago, 50 years, that built a small boat that wasn't covered, and he set out across the Pacific. And he very quickly lost the sail and ended up being swamped and unable to get the water out of the boat. He eventually got there. But what he had done is, and he had almost nothing in there. He had lost all his water and all his food. But he had memorized the declination of the star that was at the same latitude as, I think, the Tuamotus. So he hung a piece of string above his head every night to know whether to go north or south. And he hit the Tuamotus. Have you heard of that one?
Fantastic. I've heard of 2 stories like that. I think I know the one you're referring to. He was an Argentinian guy.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's There's a cool story with that because he actually ended up in Luganville, Vanuatu, which is the same port that I ended up in. And so I met a guy there who met this guy when he was doing the same trip I was doing back in the 80s, I think it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, amazing guy.
Just to explain for those that don't understand that technique. So each star circles the Earth apparently over a certain latitude. So if you memorize a star that is, say, 10 degrees south of the equator, if you can look up directly up and you're directly underneath it, you know that you're on the latitude of 10, but only when it's at the highest point called zenith in the sky. So it's a really useful technique. I'm not sure what the Polynesians use that one. They probably used a bunch of other ones as well, but it's a cool thing. Something else historically that I find interesting is the Kon-Tiki voyage, which I'm assuming you're aware of. So Thor Heyerdahl built one in the 60s, this huge raft out of balsa, and sailed it across the Pacific to prove how the islands may have been populated from South America. He was talking about sharks all the time, the boat covered in flying fish, and then his son recreated it about 10 years ago, and I think he only saw 2 sharks. Can you describe how many sharks and how much fish in marine life you saw?
Yeah, totally. And the journey of Thor Heyerdahl, that was 1947 when he did his journey from Peru to the Tuamotus. And so I took a copy of his book, which I'd read multiple times anyway. But it was just so amazing that I was doing the exact same route he was doing. I left from the same naval dockyard where he built his boat. I met people there that had met him.
Really?
So there was all this connection with Thor Heyerdahl. And I read his book about the same experiences that he was having back then and I was having there. And they were very similar. They were very similar in so many ways. And one of the things I used to do every morning was I'd throw all the flying fish. They were only small ones, but I'd have to throw all the flying fish off the boat. Sometimes they'd fly in through the cabin and wake me up at night. Sometimes they were big ones too. Yeah. Squid, there'd be big squid landing on the boat, throwing the ink everywhere. So in the morning I'd have to throw the skid off.
How do they get airborne? How does a squid get airborne?
Squid can fly.
No.
Yeah, people don't know this. Sometimes I'd see a school of squid flying through the air. One hit me on the shoulder, I think it was. Wow. Yeah, they're really interesting. Yeah, people don't know this, but sometimes they were like good sized ones too. And I'd hear them thud on the boat at nighttime when it was calm. And lots of sharks, lots of mahi-mahi. The mahi-mahi were just everywhere. It was like being in a David Attenborough documentary.
Oh, that's great to know.
All day. It was just beautiful. It was just fantastic. There were less tuna. That was the one difference between my journey and Thor's. Well, there were many differences, but as far as the ecosystem goes, I rarely saw big schools of tuna. I saw lots of tuna fishing boats, but not many tuna, whereas he saw many of them. And so I didn't see as many sharks as Thor did. He saw heaps and heaps of sharks. I still saw quite a few. But not
like
to
a couple a day, one a day, something like that?
Not that much, no. Like maybe 1 or 2 a week, I think.
Yeah.
But he had a bigger raft. There was more barnacles growing on his raft. He was making his own ecosystem. I was as well, and that's why the fish came up to me, because, the barnacles would grow, then the pilot fish would start hanging out, and then the mahi-mahi had come, and on it goes. So he had a bigger raft, no anti-fouling on the bottom, so there was more chance for an ecosystem to thrive there. But I'm surprised about what you're saying about how his son didn't see many fish at all.
Yeah.
That does surprise me.
Yeah, that's just what I recall from it. Maybe I might have got it wrong, but I thought that was noteworthy. What species of shark did you identify?
There was brown ones and blue ones and hammerheads.
Yeah, cool.
And there was the white-tipped ones as well.
Right, the white tip with a rounded white tip?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, oceanic white tips.
Yeah, cool. Which are the ones that, like Valerie Taylor, for example, they're the ones that she's most concerned with. They're quite aggressive. Okay. So, like when people got sunk with torpedoes and stuff, it was the white tips that cleaned them up the most, I think. Makos are bad too. Yeah.
Yeah. I had an interesting experience. I was about a day out of American Samoa, and there was this island I was aiming for. I missed it, but I was aiming for it. And I thought, I must be getting close to this island. And then I saw this oceanic white-tip shark come up, and I saw a big hook in its mouth. I went, I must be getting close. And I turned around. I could see the island right there.
Wow.
It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And I read that you had a sat phone, but you didn't jump on it for 75 days. Can you describe why that was?
Yeah, that's not entirely true. I used it for texting.
Yep.
Just to let my family know I was still alive, but I didn't make a call on it for 75 days. And it comes back to this? Well, there's two reasons. One, I wanted this adventure to be as traditional as possible. And two, I wanted peace and quiet out there. I didn't want to be communicating with the outside world.
Yeah.
I didn't want to know what was going on. I didn't want to talk to anyone. And so on day 75, that's when the whole journey changed like that. When I was blowing off course, I realized I wasn't going to make it to the Marquesas, which was my intended first stop. I was aiming for 100 days at sea on the first leg. Day 75, roughly, blowing off course. Oh my God, what do I do next? I'm looking at the map. I see this tiny island called Penryn. I go to the pilot books. I open it up. I find Penryn Island. It says inhabited. I go, okay, this has got to be my next stop. So I call my dad at home. I think it was about 3 a.m. where he was. And I said, look, I'm not going to make the Marquesas. My next planned stop is Penryn. And that also means that I won't get back to Brisbane because I'll be too far north. So maybe Cairns.
Yeah, cool.
So, yeah.
I'm the same. I don't like taking satellite phones for that and some other reasons as well, which I talk about in my book. And that's why I use a satellite tracker, because it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
You can just text. And you
Yes.
don't have that pressure to call, and you don't have the interference with what you're experiencing, and you don't take on those stresses at home and all that kind of stuff. But I certainly find the more kind of purist you go with an adventure, and you are taking this pretty pure in so many different ways, I find the rewards grow with the amount that you do that with.
And yeah, like I've read so many books about people who have rowed oceans, and these people use their sat phone every day to call home. And I've had advice from other people that have rowed oceans who say try to use it as little as possible, because it just becomes an addiction. That sat phone, it really does.
Yeah. And everyone's got their different methods, but yeah, certainly I'm with you on that one for me personally anyway. And
Yeah,
so it's pretty.
Everyone's different.
It's pretty hard hitting a spot, a stationary island with ocean rowing, right? Like if the current's going the wrong way. So what was stressing you out, that you'd run out of water if you missed the island, or what was?
Yeah, there was so many factors going into it, and I didn't realize before I left just how helpless you are out there in a rowing boat, and how much you do rely on the winds and the currents to push you in the right direction. And so missing that Marquesas meant that I had to find somewhere to shelter during cyclone season, because you don't get very far west of Marquesas before you enter into the cyclone region.
Right, yeah.
Into the region of the Pacific where you get cyclones. And so I had to hit this island because, well, A, I needed to get out of cyclone season, cyclone time, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And B, I was going to run out of food. The water situation would never have got dire because I always had the desal pump.
Yep.
So I never would have run out of water, theoretically.
Yep.
But the food was going to be an issue. And it gets to the point where you're not consuming enough calories to row. And then you're just drifting out there.
Were you eating the squid and the flying fish much?
The flying fish, not so much. The squid occasionally, and the mahi-mahi all the time.
Yeah. So how are you catching the mahi-mahi?
So I just had like a little Halco hard lure on a rod with a reel, and I'd just see them. I'd go, okay, I'll have that one. I'd flick out, bang, straight away. That was it. It was just like, it was easier than shopping.
Really? And did you just gaff them and bring them in? It was just out of this
world. Well, that was my issue. I didn't have a gaff on that first leg. So hooking them was fine. I'd get them near the boat pretty quickly, but getting them on board was just a nightmare. I ended up making like a noose, and I'd have to tie that around the line and then try and slip it over, like past the head and around the tail, and then pull it on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really should have had a gaff. It would have made life so much easier. But I didn't think I'd be catching that many fish, but it turned out to be a really big part of the journey.
Were you just eating as much as you could and then chucking the rest overboard? Because obviously you wouldn't have had refrigeration.
So I'd cook up the entire mahi-mahi. I'd poach the steaks, and then I'd eat as much as I could that night for tea, and then I'd have the leftovers for breakfast in the morning. And that was about as long as I'd want to leave it before it was going to go bad.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'd get through a whole mahi-mahi.
Yeah, cool. On my trip up the Barrier Reef, I was the excess meat I would slice thin and then just hang over the bow, and it just dries, and it tastes like it's like fish jerky. That was something that I didn't expect to be a really good thing, and after a while, I was like, man, it tastes as good dried as it does fresh. So yeah, that was another cool thing I never would have come across unless I was doing it sort of old school.
Yeah. Impressive. I like that. Yeah.
And when you hit one of those islands, like, so I sailed out to the Tuamotus, which is like 360 nautical miles northeast of Tahiti in a catamaran. And
Mhm.
those, so out there, for those that haven't been there, there's these huge atolls. They're like 100 kilometers round, and they have one or
Mm.
two gaps, and the tide just flows in these things like almost like rapids at times. So if you were to aim, it's hard enough just to aim for the entrance, but half the day it's going to be an outflowing tide. You never make it through anyway, and there's waves crashing on rocks and all that kind of stuff. So it's not easy at all. It's, I'd say, almost impossible to time it coming across the ocean to get through one of those gaps. So that's how you ended up. You got a toe into that first one, didn't you?
Correct. Yeah. So that was the great advantage of the satellite phone, and this is where it came in great handy. Was that I was able to call my dad in Australia, say, "Hey, I'm aiming for this island," and all I had was like a sketch in a cruising guide because I didn't even have charts for this part of the Pacific because I didn't expect that I'd be there. I'm going old school, so I didn't have a chart plotter or anything like
Yeah.
that. But I had a sketch in a cruising guide that someone gave me just before I left in Peru, and I could see there were two main passes. There was a third one as well, and I said, "Look, this sounds really sketchy. Any chance you can try and tee up a tow for me,
Yeah.
so I can get towed through?" And he said, "Yeah, that's going to happen for you." And which was really great news because after 160 days, I was pretty shot by the end of it, and my nerves were pretty shot about the whole trying to get to this tiny
Mm.
little speck, basically.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought I was going to row around the northern top side of the island and then be towed through the western
Yeah.
pass. So I kind of went north of the island, but then they actually came out through the eastern pass, which is the dangerous one in their sort of bargee boat, in their punt, I guess.
Yeah.
And then they kind of found me. We were all looking for each other. I couldn't contact them. They couldn't contact me, but eventually I spotted them. It was just the most fantastic feeling in the whole world, 160 days. And then here's this boat coming out with all these smiling people on board. And then we hooked up a tow rope and they towed me through the pass, which was a bit sketchy. I almost fell overboard actually during that tow. But we made it through the pass and it was just a fantastic feeling. And to get towed in by the men of the village was also really important because it sort of meant that they were a part of my journey as well. So during the whole time, I never turned down the offer of a tow. Like if it wasn't necessary, I'd say I'm fine. But if someone said, "Hey, I can help you out here," this was just getting in and out of islands. Then I said, I think I got towed maybe 2 times, and it was good. It really endears you to the people. They get to be a part of your journey. It's just a really good way to do it.
Yeah. And when you're on an adventure, you go from the category of tourist or business traveler, which no one's going to go massively out of their way to connecting to. Wow, this is someone that we connect with. This is the way our ancestors used to get around the ocean. So
Exactly.
they actually gave you a name, didn't they?
Yeah, it was so special for me when I stepped ashore on Penryn. A man shook my hand and he said, Tom, welcome to our island. But I have to inform you that you're no longer Tom Robinson. You are now Mahuta Hoi Hoi Asanga, which in our language means the warrior that has paddled from afar."
That's unreal.
And so for the next 4 months, I was Mahuta. And yeah, it was just so special. And I'd read in books, Tor Heyerdahl got a name when he was in Tahiti, and I thought that was dead. But I ended up arriving to one of the very few islands in the Pacific that still give people Polynesian names. And from what I understand, I'm the only white man on that island to ever get a Polynesian name.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, pretty special.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just, yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. And so 4 months you spent there.
Yeah, so I was just waiting out the cyclone season. My stay was extended by a bit because I was waiting for the supply ship to come to bring food to the island. They'd run out of rice. They were just living off fish and coconuts. And here I was trying to prepare for the next leg of the journey. And the problem with ocean rowing is that even though there are islands not too far away, you don't know if you're going to get there. You don't know if you're going to be pushed north,
Yeah.
south, east, or west, basically. East, you hope not. But anywhere between sort of northwest and southwest, you could go anywhere. So I had to pack for 4 months, basically, because I didn't know how long it was going to be. And so, yeah, I had to wait for the supply ship that only comes every 3 months anyway to get food so I could continue the journey.
And were you hanging out for that 4 months, or did you get involved in anything of note whilst you were there?
Yeah, I was busy. Life on Penryn Island is really interesting. They're very devout Christians. Life revolves around three things: church, singing, and fishing. And so every week I was fishing with the men just to survive.
On
Church
their
was
small
5
little
times.
motorboats.
They've just got little aluminium dinghies
Yep.
with 15 horse outboards,
Yep.
and they go trolling and they go net fishing and a few different things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was church 5 times a week, Sunday school twice a week. There was always singing in the hall. There was always preparation for a birthday or for this or that. So I was sort of, and we were building a new house for the minister of the church. So there was always things going on. Yeah, it wasn't like a holiday, I wouldn't say. And because life on that island isn't easy, it's not like you can just relax all the time. And especially being in a different culture, even though they were very kind and supportive and I just felt at home there. Even so, being there for 4 months is a long time. And so I didn't count that as a holiday. And as soon as I stepped off that boat, I felt like I stepped straight into the next adventure.
Yeah.
It didn't really feel like I got a break. I didn't really get a break until I was in Vanuatu, really. Yeah.
How would you rate their way of life? Like as far as happiness goes, is it a happy life overall?
It is just phenomenal. It's just fantastic. And there wasn't a day where I didn't just shake my head and go, this place is fantastic. It's all about love on this island, and it's a word that they use all the time. And we don't use that word much in Australia. It doesn't get thrown around too often. But there, they love each other and they love their God and they love their island and they sing about it all the time. They are a very happy people. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Are they suffering any effects from rising sea levels or anything?
No. So they've been measuring sea levels there quite accurately since the 80s. And there's been no measured increase in sea levels.
Yeah, cool. And just for those that aren't familiar with that too, like islands go up and islands go down. So just because one island's sinking doesn't mean... So some islands, yeah, it's variable. So it depends where you are geologically.
Exactly.
And what's happening to that plate.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, there must be over 100 inhabited atolls in the Pacific, perhaps 200, and there's hundreds more islands. There's so many islands in the Pacific, and there seems to be only a handful that are suffering from rising sea levels or that are experiencing rising sea levels, whereas most of the islands are fine.
Yeah.
And so when I was on this island, people from Australia would call me and ask me, "Hey, are these people, are they suffering? What's going on?" I said, "They don't. No, they're doing just fine. It doesn't concern them."
Yeah. It's the
nice.
geological undertones rather than the rising, the melting of the glaciers at this stage. For a lot of them, anyway. It's certainly the Tuamotus looked like they're having some issues when I was there. You can see on Google Maps that that areas are being covered. You can actually just go on the timeline. You can go back in Google Maps to 1980 and just jump through the years, and you can see that they're slowly moving. So yeah, it's variable. Cool. So you got going. You had another few stops, didn't you?
From leaving Penryn, I rode for 38 days, and I got to American Samoa, which is a really fantastic, interesting place. Not at all what you'd expect. There's no tourists there. There's not much amenity there. A lovely place. I spent 5 weeks there. I was pretty... I got knocked around. I had a staph infection on that second leg. The awful pussy sores all over my legs. It was a horrible time. And it took me 5 weeks in American Samoa to kind of get back into a good headspace and recover and just get enthused about the journey again. That was a real low point for me.
What was the trigger injury for the staph infection?
Just it was sort of between my thighs and the back of my calves where they kind of flex back and forth while I'm rolling on that sliding seat.
A chafing. Yeah, right.
Just chafe.
Okay.
Yeah. And you couldn't even tell that there was sort of open skin, but obviously there was. And then these awful, pussy wounds started to appear all over my legs, and it was pretty nasty.
That would have been highly stressful because that's a fatal thing for many people.
Yeah. And once again, the sat phone came in handy. It wouldn't have saved my life, but I was able to call my old man, who called the doctor and said, what should he do? Luckily, I had all the antibiotics on board that I needed. So I was able to take them.
Right.
And so that cleared me up pretty quickly, which was good. So I did have all that on board.
And so you went to a doc beforehand and got some decent strength ones rather than over-the-counter stuff?
Yeah. I had all sorts of opioids and antibiotics and all sorts of stuff like that, just in case.
I do that on my adventures as well, because without them, that can be possibly EPIRB time.
That could have been it. Yeah.
And so it's not just about saving your own ass; it's about preventing an expensive extraction that wouldn't have been required if you took the antibiotics. Yeah. I just ship a guy out of a snow survival expedition with a staph infection that he got through a rub on his ski boots. And I spoke to the
Wow.
doc, and I felt like I was being a bit overly cautious just even using a sat phone. And she's like, no, he needs to be chopped out straight away. And sure enough, another 24 hours and he could have lost a leg. So modern medicine's a good thing.
Freaky. Sorry. Yeah. Modern medicine's fantastic. Oh yeah. Yeah. Just one.
I also read you didn't listen to music or podcasts. You were just allowing yourself your own thoughts.
Correct. It's the same thing. I wanted this to be an old school adventure, and I thought, well, if Tor Heidal didn't have music, then I don't want it either. He had a radio actually, so I think they did listen to tunes sometimes. And I did take a little transistor radio, an old school one. Like once or twice, I tuned into it and heard some crazy station from around the world. But yeah, for me, I wanted this to be peaceful and quiet and silent. While I was building the boat, I had the radio blasting most of the time. I loved it, but I just got sick of it. And once you turn that radio off, you start to hear the birds singing, And so, yeah, and I was never bored. There was only one or two occasions where I thought, a bit of music could be quite nice right now. But to me, I think music's a drug, really. And it can be a great drug, but it can be a harmful drug as well. And so I think, it was such a pure, clean experience. I think music would have wrecked it in some ways.
Yeah. So you didn't have a girlfriend at the time or anything like that to miss? Is that...
I had one before I left on the journey, and then I said to her, I'm sorry, but this has got to end. And it was for the reason that I wanted to be out there, and I didn't want to have any ties back to Australia or back to home. Obviously, you've got family, and you're always going to have family, and that is a good thing. But yeah, I don't think it would have been wise to be in a relationship while you're doing such a long journey. That's not good for the headspace.
Yeah, and you probably would have been guilted into using the sat phone a lot more, and that would have then taken it away from the experience, which is a once in a lifetime thing to do. Yeah, you don't want to have to do it twice.
Exactly. Yeah. No thanks.
Yeah, well, maybe you do. I don't know. Certainly, Michelle said she's hanging up the oars after hers.
Yeah. I went for a little row a couple of days ago. I went, you know what? I think I've got it out of my system.
So you went American Samoa. There was one more for Vanuatu, wasn't there?
No. Well, it was American Samoa to Gower, which is an island in Vanuatu. I stayed there for a week, and then I spent sort of about 2 weeks getting from Gower down the west coast of Espirito Santo to Luganville, which is the second biggest city.
Were you stepping ashore? Because you followed the coast closely there.
I did, but see, this is the issue with ocean rowing. So when you're out there sailing, you can't just turn up to any island and step ashore. You have to go to an official port of entry. Yeah. And this is the thing that people don't realize. And as a cruising boat, you're treated just like a container ship or a cruise ship, basically. So you have to go through the paperwork, and you get the passport stamped and all these different things. And so I got to Gower. I knew that it wasn't an official port of entry, so I knew I couldn't step ashore. My plan was just to wait there on the boat for a few days until the weather eased, and then I could keep going. The only reason I stopped was because these strong southeasters were blowing me northwest towards the Solomon Chain, which I didn't want. That's not where I wanted to be. And then after a week on that island, which is longer than I expected, the weather cleared, and then I was able to get down to the northern tip of Espirito Santo. Once I got there, I thought, well, if I can row down this coast, then Luganville's not too far away, and then I can go to the shops and buy some more food and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And so I ended up spending 20 days in Vanuatu without stepping ashore.
Wow.
Which is crazy, but at the same time, I didn't want to get in trouble, and you never know with these countries. Some countries take it really seriously. You can get slapped with a big fine.
Yeah.
The journey could have really been on the rocks if I had got in trouble.
Yeah.
Looking back on it now that I understand how Vanuatu works, it would have been okay. I don't think I would have been arrested, but it wasn't a risk I wanted to take. I took that risk in American Samoa. I wasn't going to make it to Pango Pango, the main port, so I went to a different bay and I stepped ashore there. I thought I was going to die. I was feeling really awful, so I just stepped ashore. I didn't care what was going on. And as it happens, I stepped ashore in the bay where the house of the biosecurity official for American Samoa lives. So he really ripped into me. He told me I was going to go to jail. He kicked me out of the village. It was a really nasty situation. Thankfully, he was all talk. He didn't actually punish me. But I didn't want to go through that.
Yeah, got the wind up. Yeah, that's for sure.
Mm.
So now you step off from Vanuatu, and now we're getting into the realms of the shit hitting the fan, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So I was in Luganville for 3 weeks. During that time, I was waiting for the weather because it was still blowing. I was resupplying, and I was basically enjoying the culture there. Um, and then I left, and 4 days later, it all yeah, the shit hit the fan.
Yeah. So what happened the day leading up to the disaster?
Yeah. So the day leading up was my fourth day at sea, and it had been a bit bumpy, but nothing unusual really. I'd rowed all that day quite comfortably. I didn't even get seriously wet the whole day, so there were no big waves breaking into the cockpit. So the conditions were relatively benign. I hung up the oars a bit early, maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I was sitting inside the cabin. And so when you're ocean rowing, the trick is you have to keep that hatch closed when it's rough, because having that hatch closed is your one prevention from the boat capsizing and not self-righting, because with the hatch open, the cabin fills, it's no longer self-righting. I was sitting in the cabin, I had the hatch just cocked open, not heaps, just a bit, and I thought I was perfectly safe in that situation, that there was no risk that a freak wave was going to come out of nowhere and capsize me. And that's where I went wrong. I was sitting there, and then all of a sudden, just like that, the whole boat was flipped upside down almost instantly, and the cabin filled straight away. And I went, oh my God. I held my breath. I opened the hatch. I swam through it. And then I was clinging onto the side of the boat thinking, what just happened? It was just so quick and so fast. And this sort of like worst nightmare scenario, the sort of scenario that you play over in your head for months on end, has just happened. And I went, oh my God, this is crazy. This is really crazy. And the fact that it was so unexpected too, I think it really kind of shocked me. From that situation, I then found a line from the cockpit. I tied it to the gunnel to one side of the boat. I then climbed onto the upturned hull, and hanging onto the rope, I was leaning back, trying to right the boat. I tried it 3 or 4 times. That was unsuccessful. And by that stage, it was getting dark. And I knew that it was going to be unsafe to try and right the boat during the night. I didn't want to bump my head. As soon as that happens, you're knocked out. It's all over.
And you didn't have a life jacket. You're completely naked.
I was completely naked, yeah. And so I had nothing. And so then I went, okay, well, I'm just going to cling to this hull until daybreak. But before I did that, I swam back under the boat, and I removed the EPIRB from the holster on the bulkhead of the cabin. And then I swam out. I put the lanyard onto my wrist, and then I clung to the upturned hull, one hand holding onto the EPIRB, the other hand holding onto the keel like this, just to, because there were waves breaking over the boat trying to rip me off. And then I tied a line from one side of the boat over the bottom, which is now the top, around my waist once, and then back to the other side. So that was just a fail safe in case I did lose my grip and a wave tried to wash me off the bottom of the boat. I was preparing for the longest night of my life, basically. I've read stories about other people in similar situations, and they kind of reiterate the same thing, which is it's going to be the longest night of your life. The night seems to go on forever and ever, and all you want to do is wait for the sun to come up. Amazingly, it wasn't the longest night of my life. I was supremely optimistic. It was this strange optimism that came over me. Of course, for the first hour, things were pretty freaky. When you set the EPIRB off, you know it's flashing and it's beeping, but you don't know if anyone's picking that signal up. You don't know what's happening. So for the first hour, there was some dark thoughts, and that was not nice, but I had to push them aside. And from then on, it just turned into an exciting experience. I was sitting on the boat. I was humming and singing. I was very cold the whole night. That was the hardest part of it. I was really cold.
So it was blowing like 20 knots or something, wasn't it?
When the ship picked me up, they saw 35.
Wow.
Yeah.
So white caps.
So yeah, it was rough.
Around.
Constantly. Yeah. It was a bit rough. Yeah. And I think it increased during the night, because it definitely wasn't 35 when I'd been rowing all day comfortably.
So just stepping back to those dark thoughts, like what was it? Fear of death? Was it fear of failure?
It was fear of death. That's what it was. I guess, yeah. So the first thought is, I'm not going to get rescued. And then that's a scary thought. But from that thought came a backup plan, which is, well, if I don't get rescued, how am I going to right this boat? how am I going to improve my situation? What's the next step? And I was waiting for daybreak. And once daybreak came, if I didn't see a ship, I sort of had this sort of mental game where I just planned for the next 3 hours, I had no idea what time it was out there, but I knew that the moon would come up during the night. So I just looked forward to the moon coming up. Once the moon came up, I was happy as Larry. Then the next step was I'm going to wait for daybreak. And when daybreak comes, I said to myself, you're going to see a ship. But if that didn't happen, then I would have swam under the boat and got some food because I was hungry and thirsty. Food and water, I would have got that. And then I would say to myself, well, you're going to see a ship by midday. And if you don't see a ship by midday, then by the afternoon, you'll see a ship. And if you don't, you just got to do one more night on the bottom of that boat. So I was going through in my mind all these plans. So I was always had something to look forward to next, which is, I think, a really important lesson I learned throughout the journey is what's next, always looking forward to the future. And that helped me get through the night. And when I did finally see a light sort of blue, sort of purpley in the east, I kind of went, already, that wasn't so bad.
Well, before that, you saw a plane, didn't you?
That was when it all became real. I didn't know what time it was at that point. I later found out it was something around midnight that a French jet flew over, and they must have done about a dozen passes back and forth, flying around me, big circles. Obviously, they were searching for me. I didn't know if they had seen me. I didn't know if they could find me.
Did you hear that?
But as soon as
night, did you? Did you hear the aircraft?
Yeah, it was this strange situation where I saw this bright, shining star in the distance, and I went, oh my God, that's the most beautiful star I've ever seen. And it just got brighter and brighter and brighter, and my eyes were fixed on it. And then eventually I realized it was a plane with a searchlight, and it was just the craziest feeling. I went, oh my God, this is real. This is happening. Wow. This isn't some crazy dream. Yeah, there's actually a plane out there looking for me.
They've got very similar. I've got an ex-Army helicopter mate who works in the Rescue Coordination Centre here. And he was saying they have similar jets to what we have, long range, fairly small, almost like VIP jets that have been repurposed for search and rescue. Yeah. So I'm guessing they would have had a stabilized thermal camera, and so they would have slaved that to the position of your GPS, which would have been emitting on 1215, and they would have seen the upturned vessel, and they would have seen your hot body emitting all that heat out into the atmosphere, and known you're alive. I'm guessing.
Exactly. And it was strange for me because they did so many passes. Like, they must have done a dozen. They went to get fuel and they came back again. So I didn't know if they'd even spotted me. I didn't know what sort of equipment they had for search and rescue. And all I had light-wise was the strobe on the EPIRB. And so while they were flying over, I'd sort of point the EPIRB towards my torso. Yep. So the light would reflect off my torso, try and give it a bit more sort of reflection. But yeah, obviously they have the FLIR, they call it the forward. What do they call it? They call it the forward-looking infrared. Yep. Yeah, and so with that, they would have picked me up. Pretty quickly, I believe.
And even with the strobe, I reckon the pilots would have been able to visually see that if they were circling, at any reasonable altitude. So that'd certainly give you a warm and fuzzy that you. Well, I don't know. It'd give me a bit of a warm and fuzzy knowing the kind of sensors that they have. Was there barnacles like ripping your butt? And stuff on?
No, the boat was pretty clean. I anti-fouled it in Samoa, so that the bottom was nice and clean.
That could have been a nightmare if it was covered in barnacles, because you could have been bleeding.
That would have been
sharks.
That would have been truly awful. That would have been truly awful.
Yeah, you would have been feeding the mahi-mahi. So then you actually saw. So the sun came up and you saw the plane circling again. Is that right?
Yeah, the plane came back in the morning. I went, I think there's going to be a ship any minute now. And yeah, not long after, I saw a big black sort of splodge on the horizon. I assumed it was a container ship. I went, oh, that's pretty cool. I've never been on a container ship. And then I got closer and I realized it was a cruise ship.
Yeah.
I went, oh, of course, in the nude, 2,000 people with their cameras lining the decks, binoculars out, checking me out. So it was a cruise ship.
There was something else going on technically with your EPIRB that you were kind of committed to being rescued whether you wanted to or not. Can you explain about that?
Yeah, this is a really sort of strange situation, one that I never expected. But the GME EPIRB that I bought, I had two of them.
Sorry, I should just explain can you describe what an EPIRB is?
Yeah, so EPIRB stands for Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon. And I've got the box of it here so I can show you if you want.
Yeah, cool.
That's what it looks like. Yep. And so that's mounted on the boat, and when things go bad, you can activate it, and that sends a message to Joint Rescue Coordination Centre in Canberra, who then coordinates a rescue with the nearest coordination centre. The nearest coordination centre to my position was JRCC Noumea in New Caledonia. So that's why there were French jets overhead, etc. Yep. So I had 2 GME EPIRBs, one mounted on the bulkhead outside the cabin in the cockpit, and there was one mounted inside the cabin. I also had a third GPS, which is a PLB, a smaller unit, but it does the same job. And so I had an issue with this EPIRB on the third leg of the journey, in that one day it started going off. It wasn't particularly rough, and I just heard this beeping, and I went, well, that's really strange. And I went out into the cabin, I went out into the cockpit, and it was the EPIRB in the cockpit that was going off. And the EPIRB sits inside a holster, and on each side of that holster, embedded into the plastic, is these 2 pieces of metal, sort of iron, and they stop the EPIRB from going off automatically when it gets wet. So the EPIRB will go off automatically when it's wet, unless it's inside the holster, which has these 2 pieces of metal. And so one day the EPIRB started going off, and I went, well, what the hell's going on here? And I looked at the holster, and those 2 bits of metal had rusted and broken the plastic around them and fallen out. So then the moisture in the air was enough for the EPIRB to go off. I went, well, this isn't ideal. So then I had to use the sat phone and call the folks at home and say, false alarm.
Yep.
And the only thing I could do in that situation was I replaced the holsters. So I put the holster that was inside the cabin outside, and the one that was outside inside. So then the one inside the boat hopefully wouldn't go off when it was wet.
Yeah.
It did go off another time just with the moisture in the air. That was enough to set it off. So then I got a bit of Vaseline and put it over the sensors, which stopped that. So what happened when I capsized was that as soon as I capsized, I knew that the EPIRB inside the cabin would be transmitting, whether I liked it or not. When that happened, I sort of went, well, there's probably going to be a rescue. I didn't know if it was going to take 12 hours, 24 hours, 36, 48. I didn't know what was going to happen, 72. I was preparing for the worst. And so I thought, well, if it's going off anyway, I'll get the other one that's in the cockpit, and I'll put it on I'll take it out of its holster and put it with me on the top of the upturned boat. Because if there's one going off and it's half submerged, there might be intermittent signals. Yep. It might not be doing the right thing. But I sort of like to stress the fact that if the holster wasn't broken, the EPIRBs wouldn't have been going off, and I wouldn't have set those EPIRBs off until the next day if I hadn't been able to right the boat. I only got a few opportunities to do that before it got dark, and then the next day the plan was to flood certain sections of the hull, which I believe would have enabled me to right the boat without too much issue.
Yeah, I agree.
But by the time the new day dawned, the ship was there. And you can't really say no when the cruise ship's just turned up.
Of course. And your sat phone was now probably dead, right? It's just soaked in salt water, so you got no way of turning off the rescue.
Yeah. And so the biggest issue with the EPIRB was that there's no off switch. There's an off switch if it's dry, but if it's wet, there's no off switch. And I would consider that quite a flaw in the EPIRB. So things could have been different if there was an off switch, and perhaps I would have completed the journey. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting scenario, and like that EPIRB that was in the cockpit and the holster broke, that had been out in the elements for probably maybe 14 months before that happened. But I would be of the opinion that an EPIRB should last longer than that, or the holster should at least.
Yeah. So you're basically committed to being rescued anyway now. So the ship's coming. How was that for that as it approached you to within rescue range?
Yeah, that was a really crazy feeling. It all felt so dramatic and over the top with this huge ship arriving. And then the ship got closer and closer and closer. And because I had no communication, so I didn't know what their plan was. They didn't know what my plan was. But I thought, I'm just going to sit here until the ship gets close enough, and I have to swim. I can swim. And eventually the ship got right there, and I bounced along the side of the hull until I got to the rope ladder. And then I was able to climb up the rope ladder and to safety.
Did they put you on the lee side so you're sheltered from the waves?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. They were to windward of me, but it was still a hairy situation because there was still, quite a sea. and so that was a bit nerve wracking. I didn't know if I was going to get pushed under the boat or if I was going to have to swim away from the situation.
Yeah.
It was pretty intense. Yeah,
And I'm guessing every tourist on board the ship, and even all the workers, are probably like leaning over the guardrails with their phones, filming you and stuff.
Exactly. There were literally hundreds of cameras in hands and binoculars, and it was all pretty crazy. You can kind of see in the videos that I'm trying to cover myself up as best as I can, which should have been the last thing on my mind, but it was pretty high up.
So you got to the top of the rope, and did someone kind of pull you ashore and hand you a towel or something?
Yeah, so they've got this door in the side of the hull of the ship for the pilot.
Yeah.
So that's how the pilots get on and off the boat. And so I kind of got about 3/4 of the way up the ladder. I got to the point where my torso was sticking above this doorway. Yeah. I said, "Hey, I'm in the nude. You got a towel?" And there was this corridor where there must have been 20 or 30 people lining this corridor staring at me, all crew and medical staff. And so then these guys wrapped these 2 towels around me. Then they gave me this big robe. And then there was a wheelchair for me. I said, "I don't need a wheelchair." They're like, "Sit down, mate. You're going to have the wheelchair." So I got in the wheelchair and they wheeled me to the sick bay.
Did anyone film that onboarding process? And have they sent you the footage?
No, I have not seen that. No, I don't think they did. I think because I was in the nude, I think they...
they're being respectful because you're nude. Okay, that's...
I think so, yeah.
No, it's good and bad.
Yeah.
Wow. And meanwhile... your boat is just floating off into the distance and hasn't been since, right? It's been seen since.
Exactly. So I have a strong feeling that I'll see the boat again. I think that with the way the currents move, and now that it's upside down, it's not going to be pushed by the breeze as much. So I think it'll end up in Queensland somewhere. There's a few reefs out there, so it could end up on a reef out there. But if it does make it to the Australian coastline, there's a chance it might make it over the reef, the Great Barrier Reef, in one piece. Yep. If it does, then it'll wash up on a beach, potentially relatively unscathed.
Yep.
And I may be able to use it again. You never know. But there's also a very high chance that it'll be wrecked on a reef.
Yeah. Or it might just be sitting there and Coast Watch will see it and they'll report it.
That wouldn't surprise me. But I think it kind of has to end up either Queensland or maybe New Guinea, Torres Strait, but I think Queensland's more likely.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So if anyone's listening and you operate in that area, or you know anyone that flies the Coast Watch plane, just everyone keep your eyes out. I reckon I was saying we need some social media campaign to find your boat because it's going to be so cool to get it back again. You put so much work into it. It's part of your story. It's probably still going to be usable. And
I think so.
Just be full of barnacles and stuff.
Yeah.
And so you're on the cruise ship. Did you feel like, did they seem frustrated that they had to come out of their way, or how was their reaction?
Yeah, I was really surprised. I thought I was going to get a dressing down from the crew and I was going to be in trouble. But the crew were just fantastic. They were such lovely people. The captain came down maybe an hour after I was rescued and I got to meet him and he was very nice about it. The crew, they couldn't have done more for me. They were just fantastic.
Oh.
Yeah. Obviously, I kind of, I interrupted people's cruises. Yep. So there were some angry people on board and I was disappointed that I did that to those people.
Did they voice their concerns to you?
Yeah, quite vocally, some of them did.
Really?
Yeah. It kind of, I couldn't go certain places on the ship because I knew that things would get nasty.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
The thing is, like 90% of the people on the boat thought it was a highlight of their trip and they loved it and it was really exciting. There was 10% that were really annoyed. And so the 90% would be trying to get photos with me and I felt like this weird celebrity. And then the 10% would get angry at me because I was acting like a celebrity. And then the 90% would be getting angry at the 10%. And it would, I had to run away from a few situations that were going to get violent pretty quickly.
Far out.
But thankfully, the P&O staff was so good and they said, "Tom, if anything happens, just call security straight away. Just, we're there for you," sort of thing. So the staff were exceptional. And yeah, most of the crew and most of the passengers were very, very nice to me. Very, very nice.
Awesome.
But yeah, I must apologise to the people whose crews I interrupted.
No, good on you, mate. And then you ended up getting home and your parents by then would be obviously very relieved that all that's, happened safely and you're back home.
Yeah, it was really nice to come home. I flew out of Auckland like the same day that the ship arrived. And then I was back in Brisbane that night, and I got to the airport, and there was all these camera crews and all these people there, cheering me on as I got there. It was all pretty surreal, very strange.
Yeah. And how was that experience? Like, did you feel like the media were fairly respectful and told your story fairly accurately or not?
Yeah, look, I haven't looked at much of the media coverage. I kind of want to stay away from all that. I don't read the Instagram and Facebook comments. I know there's been plenty of fighting on Facebook and stuff like that. Of the few articles I have seen, I've been really impressed. It seems to be a good news story. They like the story. It's all good. I know someone told me a couple of days ago that the BBC article was a bit slanted towards the whole reckless Aussie nude man sort of thing, out there doing something stupid. So there's a bit of that, but I think most of the media's been pretty good.
Yeah, good. And so what's on the horizon now?
Yeah, so I'm still getting back to reality. I'm still answering a lot of phone calls and emails and stuff like that. It's all very strange. But the plan now is to write a book about the journey. So I love to read. I love to write. Sort of this whole journey has been quite a big sort of aesthetic experience, from designing the boat, building the boat, rowing the boat, time on the islands. And to finish that off, I need to write a book about the whole journey. And so when that book is finished, that's when the journey will come to an end, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's next. And then in long term, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but there'll be a few more adventures on the cards, I think.
Yeah. Well, I read your blog posts, and you got a great gift for writing. You've got a great cover for your book. You're sitting on top of your thing. And we've already chatted a little bit offline about the other adventures. And so I know there's going to be many, many more, and probably many more, books and stuff. It's a way to fund these kinds of things. So
Exactly.
It's really exciting to meet someone that's following their dream and willing to put their life on the line for it, and getting all of the rewards out of it along the way as well. And I saw on that last blog post, you were frustrated a little bit at people feeling sad and sympathetic towards you because can you explain that?
Yeah, that was one of the strangest things about coming home for me. For the lead up to the journey, there was this great energy about what I was doing and how I was going about it, and people were so excited for me. That continued throughout the whole journey. Every time I stopped, whatever island I was at, the people really embraced me, and they really got behind my journey. And then when it ended this way, despite the ending, I expected to come home and people would be very congratulatory and supportive. But it was kind of like the silence was deafening. I think people really didn't know how I was feeling. And so everyone sort of avoided me. And it was all very strange. And so I do think that most people thought that I was going to be really down in the dumps, really sad about how it ended. But I was really happy because I achieved everything I set out to achieve on this journey. I got to experience those crazy highs, those crazy lows. I got to experience Polynesian culture, Melanesian culture. I ticked all those boxes. And so the fact that the ending wasn't exactly as planned, I don't mind. And so I think people are trying to be sympathetic to me, but I say sympathy be damned. I had a fantastic time. Let's rejoice. Let's talk about how great this journey was and not focus on the ending like the media have done.
Yeah. I like it. I think that shows that your motivations are in that right spot where you've done it for the experience, not the accolade. And it's like, the accolade's gone. Oh, well, that's like the small part, that the big part is the experience. And if you're genuinely chasing that the accolade isn't that important.
Exactly right.
And that's why there's been I think there was that Dutch round the world sailor, Laura
Decker.
And I think she kind of deliberately nullified her attempt just to kind of throw it away and just say, I'm not after that. I wanted the experience.
Yes.
There was another in the 1960s, I think, a Fastnet race. This big name sailing guy went around the world and nullified his finish of the race for the same thing. He just wanted to turn his nose up at the idea that I'm doing this for a particular reason and I've got what I needed, and this helps me know that I did it for the right reason. So I get that method.
And for me, I was kind of nervous about coming back to Australia, having completed the journey successfully, and about media and about how I would be treated. And so when all that went away, when I got rescued, there was this amazing weight that was lifted off my shoulders. And now I just feel like an average Joe again, and it's such a good feeling because for the past 2 years I've been this kind of crazy man kind of adventurer, and now I just feel like a normal person again, and it's such a nice feeling. It's so good.
Yeah, I guess now you can take on Mahuta as a new identity. Like that's I don't know. I've never got a
Yeah,
tattoo in my life, but that's the kind of thing I'd consider getting a tattoo for, because that's a really
yeah,
special name, and this is now a new part of your life, which
it
is, you're
is.
never going to go back, and it's only a good thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's all been such a wonderful experience, and I wouldn't take back a second of it.
Well, yeah, thanks heaps for chatting. I'll obviously put all your links up. I've got there's clips that you've put out of that really amazing moment when you came ashore for the first time after it was 160 days. There's a whole, it's really nicely made content as well. People should follow you and keep an eye out for when your book comes out, all those kinds of things. So yeah, I'll put links to those in the show notes. Is there anything final you want to say before you sign off?
Oh, I'd just like to thank everybody who's supported me throughout the past 2.5 years of this journey. There's the kind emails, the kind words, the donations through the GoFundMe, the responses to my updates, all that sort of thing has been really amazing. And it is through the generosity of so many individuals around the world that this journey got off its feet and was as successful as it was. So just a big thank you to everyone out there.
Awesome. Thanks heaps, mate. Really appreciate you coming on.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
This interview is also available in podcast format. I'll put a link in the description. And I've got many other podcasts where I interview adventurers. Not all of them are YouTube videos as well. A lot of them are just audio. Feel free to check that out. You can also check out my Surviving the Great Barrier Reef expedition videos. And that's the one where I go up the Great Barrier Reef in a dugout canoe, and you saw a couple of snippets from that. Thanks again, Tom, for coming on the show.